Well, let's get some more analysis here in the studio. I'm joined by Alexei Haran, who is Professor of Comparative Politics at the Kyiv Mohila Academy. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Professor. Let me start by asking, I've got lots of things I want to ask you. When you were looking at that report with me just now, that exodus of Russian people fleeing by car, flying into neighboring countries, as someone who is based in Ukraine, what does that make you feel?
Well, first of all, the statement of Putin about mobilization is a sign of weakness. Russia didn't gain militarily in Ukraine. Ukrainians are on counteroffensive, and basically it shows that Russia is losing the ground. And Putin decided to call for partial mobilization, but we see what is the reaction of common Russians.
Which is to run because they don't want to fight.
Exactly. Exactly. So the morale of Ukrainians and of Russian soldiers is totally different. Russian soldiers do not understand, or conscripts, they do not understand what they are fighting for. And we Ukrainians, we understand that we are fighting for freedom.
And presumably the Russians have heard horror stories about what's happened to their friends, their colleagues who have gone to fight in Ukraine, ill-equipped, with, it would appear, an incoherent strategy.
That's right. So Russian army appeared to be corrupt. So there were a lot of talks about the second largest and the most powerful army in the world. And in reality, it appears that Russian army is corrupt.
You've been on the front line in Ukraine, and you've seen for yourself what the situation is like in places like Donetsk, in Zaporizhia. I'd like to ask you what you saw when you're on the front line. You were there only a week or so ago. And also tell me, what is morale like amongst the Ukrainian soldiers?
Okay. So first of all, I was without a gun. I was as a volunteer on a humanitarian mission, and also as a researcher, as political scientist, you need to see by your own eyes what is going on. But I was directly on, as we say, zero line in the trenches, so I had possibility to talk to soldiers and their commanders. And first thing, they are saying, we have a lot of problems. We have problems with supply, we have a problem with coming winter, we have a problem with ammunition, with weapons. There is one thing that we do not have problems with: morale. So we have high morale, we are going to fight, we are going to liberate the territories. And I think this message is very, very important, because, again, Ukrainians are fighting not only to liberate territories, not only to defend their freedoms, but they are fighting for democracy. And this is very, very important. This is a fight between democracy and authoritarianism. And in this situation, you know, what is also important, that still we do appreciate all the Western support, all the international support which is coming, but this is not enough. We need more. So Russians, they still have preponderance in missiles, in aviation. So we need in tanks. So we need this kind of weapons in order to continue counteroffensive. And one more thing, this is from my personal story, because my daughter was under bombardment in Kyiv. She moved to Vinnytsia, another city, bombarded there. She moved to Lviv on the border with Poland and was bombarded there. So there's no safe haven in Ukraine. What the tactics of Russia now is very, very simple: to destroy everything, to intimidate Ukrainians, to destroy all the energy infrastructure because of the coming winter. So, and these are attacks against civilians. So they would like to intimidate Ukrainians, but so far we are doing a lot of polls. Ukrainians are decided, so they are not afraid.
Okay, so these fear tactics. With Alexei Haran, who is a Professor of Comparative Politics at the Kyiv Mohila Academy. Thanks for staying with us. Just looking at that report about the prisoner exchange, your thoughts on really the significance of it and how it came about?
Well, it's very significant. It's very important, because, you know, the fighters of Azov who defended Mariupol, they are almost like personal enemies of Mr. Putin, you know, who depicted them as criminals and war criminals and all other crazy things. And by the way, some people were already condemned to death in the occupied territories by Russia. So the liberation, this exchange of prisoners is very important because we liberated the commanders of Azov and some people who were sentenced to death. And they're heroes, but we still to remember about those prisoners who are in Russia's prisons. And I'm talking even not only about Ukrainian soldiers, about Ukrainian civilians who were deported to Russia, about Crimean Tatars who are sentenced to many years in prisons and others. So we need to have more exchanges and more pressure from international community. Why it happened, this exchange? Look, I'm not an insider of the process, and this is difficult to say how it was managed. But first of all, it was exchanged for the head of Mr. Medvedchuk, who is a close ally of Putin. Putin is godfather of Medvedchuk's daughter, so they are very connected together. Perhaps this is one thing. The other thing is potential mediation of Turkish President Erdogan. Again, I do not know details how it happened. It's good it happened, and we need to do more to release Ukrainian prisoners. Not only soldiers, but civilians as well.
Professor, before you go, I just want to ask you a really obvious question. We saw in that report your President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's perhaps one of the most recognizable world leaders of the current age. And, perhaps 6-7 months ago, most people didn't know who he was. Now he's an internationally recognizable figure. How is his popularity holding out in Ukraine itself?
He remains popular figure. The trust to him is high as well because he is commander-in-chief of Ukrainian armed forces. And look, the most trusted institution in Ukraine right now, guess, is army. So that's why President Zelensky remains very popular. But we'll see what will happen. We are a democratic country, so now the elections are postponed. When the martial law would be cancelled, there would be new elections, and it's for Ukrainians to decide. So the popularity of Zelensky is high. He has very good chances to be re-elected. The popularity of his party is not as high, frankly speaking, and there would be no one-party majority in Ukrainian parliament.
There's a feeling that he's played his cards right as your leader and your commander-in-chief.
Again, we are a free country even now, even during martial law. So there is possibility to criticize. There is a lot of debate, but there is a general agreement between the ruling parties, the opposition, the experts, the civil society. Everybody is saying we know about mistakes, but we will discuss it after the victory, and that's important that you have this kind of national cohesion.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you very much. Haran. I will continue to watch your program from Kyiv.
Well, please do. Stay tuned.
I will.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Moving on now. Italy.